यस सर, आवाज ठीक है लेकिन कुछ नजर नहीं आ रहा स्लाइड वगैरह।
ओके प्लीज वेट। अब चेक।
यस सर, अब नजर आ रहा है।
Okay, today we shall discuss about components of homeostatic control system, and the first component of the homeostatic control system, those are reflexes. We have previously discussed about the thermoregulatory system, and we have explained all that process with the help of various example. So if we talk about various other homeostatic control system like that of thermoregulatory system, these all other regulatory system, they are basically included in the stimulus response sequences, or we can also call them as the reflexes. Mean over all other regulatory system, they are basically stimulated, and once they are stimulated they will produce a response, and this stimulus response sequence is known as reflexes. So if we look at the reflexes, sometimes the reflexes they respond to the stimuli, and there are certain other reflexes they are regulating the internal environment, and those reflexes which are regulating the internal environment, they are regulating the body even without any stimuli, any conscious awareness that is not involved there, and still those reflexes they are regulating our body. So reflex is basically a specific involuntary unpremeditated or unlearned, you can also call it as built-in response to a particular stimuli. So all these are definition of the reflex. That reflex is basically involuntary, unpremeditated. Similarly, it is unlearned and built-in response to a particular stimulus. When your body is exposed to any specific type of the stimuli is, as all of you know, that any type of the change in the external environment that can also be called as stimuli. So when your body is exposed to any particular stimulus, your body will show an involuntary, unpremeditated, and unlearned and built-in type of the response to that specific stimulus. That part of the body is called, or that response of the body is called reflex. So there are various example of the reflexes which can be observed in daily life. For example, pulling one's hand away from a hot object. That is one example of the reflex. Similarly, when you shut your eyes, when any object approaches your face rapidly, that is another example of the reflexes. Many other responses they can also be observed, but we can say that they are automatic and stereotype, but those are as a result of learning and practice. So response is basically an involuntary type of the reaction that is unlearned, that is unpremeditated, and your body show that specific type of the response without any learning or without any practice. That is called as reflex. Sometimes although the reflexes are, they appear to be automatic, but those reflexes they are basically shown by the body as a result of learning and practice. For example, when you look at an experienced driver, he or she perform many complicated acts while driving a car. So these complicated operations or these complicated responses, they are, although they are automatic, stereotype, and unpremeditated, but they come, or the driver which is actually driving the car, he become master as a result of continuous efforts or the conscious effort, and similarly as a result of learning, he is automatically now he's showing those arts or those responses. But although they appear as what we can call them as involuntary or unpremeditated, but actually they are as a result of learning and as a result of practice. So this is the another type of the responses are the reflexes, which appear as unpremeditated, as unlearned reflexes or unlearned responses, but actually they are due to the practice and due to the learning. So reflexes, such type of the reflexes, they will be called as learned or acquired reflexes. The first type of the reflexes, they will be simply called as reflexes because they are unpremeditated and inbuilt response shown by the body. But the second type of the responses or second type of the reflexes, which are as a result of practice or are as a result of learning, those are acquired by our body. Those will be called as learned or acquired reflexes. And can you see the slide now?
Yes, sir.
Generally speaking, most reflexes, no matter how basic they appear, they are subject to alteration by learning. Mean majority of the responses in our body, although they appear very basic and they appear inbuilt type of the responses, but majority of them they are altered as a result of learning. So we can say that sometimes there is no clear distinction between a basic reflex and a learned component, or between a basic and a learned reflexes. So this is all about the reflexes, that they are involuntary type of the reaction shown by the body, and in certain cases those reaction they can be modified as a result of learning. So those will be called as learned or acquired reflexes. Now we talk about the pathway. The pathway which is basically mediating a reflex, that pathway will be called as reflex arc. And reflex arc is having various components. If we talk about the various component of the reflex arc, the one important part of the reflex arc is stimulus. As all of you know, that stimulus is basically a detectable change in the internal or external environment. Any type of the change that is perceived by our body, whether that change is in the external environment or in the internal environment, that will be called as stimulus. And that change in the temperature, for example, in the potassium concentration or blood pressure, all these type of the changes, they will be considered as the stimulus, and those changes they will be detected by our body. The second component of the reflex arc is receptor. So this change is actually detected by specific type of the cells or specific type of the receptors which are present on the body. So receptor, they detects the environmental change, and so we can also call them as detector. These receptor, they can also call them as detector. So stimulus will act upon a receptor, and when the stimulus it stimulate a receptor, a signal will be produced, and this signal will be relayed to our integrating center. And as all of you know, that brain is actually behaving as the integrating center. So the pathway which is covered by the signal between the receptor and the integrating center, that is called efferent pathway. Here you can see in this diagram that this is the stimulus. Begin mean here the reflex action is actually, reflex action will start from here. When any stimuli or any stimulus that is actually a change either in the external or internal environment, that stimulus is applied to the body, that change will be detected by specialized type of the cells which are present in our body. Those can also be called as detector, and those receptors, they will perceive this change, whether the change is in the internal environment or in the external environment. As a result of this change, a signal will be produced, and this signal will move towards the integrating center. The pathway by which the signal is moving towards the integrating center, which is brain, this specific pathway will be called as efferent pathway. So you can differentiate between the efferent and efferent. Efferent always mean towards, and efferent always mean away. Mean when we use the term afferent, it mean that pathway is going towards the brain, and when we use the term efferent, it mean that pathway is away from the integrating center or away from the brain. So you can simply differentiate between the efferent and efferent pathway. So general term efferent means to carry, to in this case to integrating center. To carry mean towards, moving towards, and receive the signals, and it can receive signals from many receptors, as numerous receptors they may be present on the body, and all of them they are perceiving the change in the external environment, and they are relaying their information in the form of the signal to the integrating center. So integrating center is actually a very complex, highly specialized structure which is present in the nervous system, and this integrating center, it has had the ability to receive many information from many receptors simultaneously. Some of which they may be and this integrating center, it may produce its response differently to different type of the stimuli. So it's detected by the receptors, and the receptor, they will produce the signals, and those signals will be relayed to our integrating center, which is brain. After integration of the information or signals, the information, they will be relate to our effector, and effectors are mostly our muscles and our glands. So this pathway will be called as efferent pathway. So this is general component of a reflex arc. This whole pathway will be called as reflex arc. Reflex arc, it basically starts from stimulus, and it ultimately ends in a response. So this is basically a reflex arc. It is functioning as a negative feedback control system. The response of the system of contracting or counteracting or eliminating the stimulus. So this response will be either to counteract the stimulus, or it is to eliminate the change in the external or internal environment. So this is we have already discussed this negative feedback control, and this is always, it is denoted by a negative sign or dash. So this is the component of the reflex arc. So output of an integrating center, it will produce the net effect of the total efferent input. Mean it is basically an integration of numerous information, those information which are being received by our integrating center from different type of the receptor cells. Those information will be integrated, and a combined sort of the or coordinated sort of the response will be produced by our effector cell. So output of an integrating center is sent to the last component of the system, as I have told you that the last system or the last component of the homeostatic control system, that will be effectors, and that last component will produce the response of the system. This component is known as the effector, and information which are being relayed from integrating center to the effector, they are just like a command directing the effector to alter receptivity. Now once the information they are being relayed from the integrating center or from our brain to these effector, the effector, they will mediate, or they will change their activity. Either they will increase their contraction or relaxation, or in case if the effectors are muscles or the glands, they will start to secrete their specific type of the secretion. The pathway along which this information travel, this is called efferent pathway. As we have discussed, that from the integrating center, the information are relayed to the effectors, and the pathway by which the information are traveling from the integrating center to our effector, that pathway will be called as efferent pathway. And ultimately efferent mean to carry away. So that's how you can differentiate between the efferent mean towards, and efferent mean away. So the information in this case, they are going away from the integrating center. So reflex is basically we can also define or describe reflex it is basically the sequence of the event which are linking a stimulus to a response, or you may also describe it as the sequence of the events which are which are started by a stimulus and which end by ultimate response of the body. That whole sequence of the event they will be called as reflex and reflex arc. We can also call them as reflex arc. So if the response produced by the effector, if that response is decreasing the magnitude of the stimulus, that's the stimulus that has triggered the sequence of the event, then this type of the response will be called as negative feedback. As I have previously told you in the previous lecture that sometime the thermoregulatory response which is produced by our body, it will tend to move the stimulus or move the variable in opposite direction. For example, we have discussed that when the room temperature was decreased to 5 degrees centigrade, our body temperature is start to decrease as well, and various type of the homeostatic response or the thermoregulatory mechanism, they will be active in our body, and all those thermoregulatory mechanism, they will tend to move that variable in opposite direction. I mean, they are basically to reduce the event of the effect of the stimulus. That specific type of the control is called negative feedback, and this is a typical type of the homeostatic control system. Not all the reflexes they are associated with such feedback. Mean not all the reflexes they always produce the negative feedback control. Sometimes the reflexes they may can produce the positive feedback as well in our body. For example, the smell of the food, it will stimulate the secretion of a hormone by the stomach, but this hormone does not eliminate the smell of the food. Mean once the hormone is secreted by our stomach, hormones are basically which are chemical messenger, and they are secreted by various glands which are present in our body. So in that case, the smell of the food or this secretion will not decrease the smell of the food. So it means this is the positive feedback control system. So it is not the case always that the response of the body, it will result in the negative feedback control. Sometime this response may also cause the positive feedback in our body as well. So components of the negative feedback homeostatic reflex are we can also apply this to thermoregulation. As all of you know that temperature receptors, they are endings of the certain types of the nerve cells in various parts of the body. They produce the signals. Signals mean they detect the change in the either in the external or internal environment, and they produce the signals, and those signals they are produced in the nerve cells, and those signals they are actually determined by they are controlled by the temperature changes. So these electrical signals, they are conducted by the nerve fibers which are called as efferent neurons. We can also call them as efferent neuron, and the pathway will be called as efferent pathway. So those signals, they will be relayed to the specific part of the brain, thermoregulatory part of the brain, where the integration of those information that will be carried out. And integrating center or the temperature regulating center which is present in our brain, it will in turn will determines the signal, or it will send out the signal along those nerve cells, and those nerve cells in that specific case will be called as efferent neurons. So the signals or the information of their integration, they will be relayed to the effectors with the help of the efferent neurons, and the effector, they will either stimulate the skeletal muscles or they will stimulate the muscles in the skin blood vessels to contract. So that's how the reflex arc will be produced in case of thermoregulation. So the nerve fibers to the muscles, they are the efferent, they are moving via the efferent pathway, and the muscles are basically behaving as the effector. So it means that there is negative control will be produced in this case. So as I have told you in the initial slide, that there are various type of the receptors that are receiving the information either from the external environment and internal environment, and those information they are relayed to the brain, which is behaving as integrating center, and brain will produce its response in a coordinated fashion. Mean after receiving the information from all the receptor, the brain will integrate all those information and it will produce its effect in a coordinated fashion. So almost all the body cells they can behave as the effector in homeostatic reflexes, but two specialized type of the tissues are the cells. One are called muscles and other are the glands. They are the major effector of the biological control system. So initially, when we look at this term reflex, it was restricted to certain situation. Mean we have discussed a standard pathway of this reflex, that it is generated by the when the change is produced in the external or internal environment. That change is relayed to the integrating center in the form of the signal, and with the help of the efferent pathway, the integration will be carried out in the brain, and then the information will be relayed to the effectors via the efferent pathway. This is what we can call it as a standard pathway of the reflex or standard reflex arc. But now we can say that this is very restrictive, you can say, definition of this reflex, but we can't restrict this to this traditional pathway. Sometime we can say that the principles they are same when a blood-borne chemical messenger known as hormone, rather than a nerve fiber, it is serving as a efferent pathway. We will discuss this in upcoming lecture, that sometimes hormone can also behave as the messenger, and the hormone is secreted by endocrine gland directly into the blood, and from the blood the hormone will travel to the integrating center, and after its integration or integration of the message, the message will be relayed to various type of the effectors, for example glands or muscles. So in this case, hormone secreting gland, the endocrine gland, sometime it can also serve as an integrating center. So we can say that we can't restrict the term reflex to a very traditional type of the pathway, that it is initiated by a stimuli and it moves via the efferent pathway towards the integrating center, and from the integrating center the information are relayed to the efferent via the efferent pathway towards the effector. But we can also use it in certain other cases. For example, I have told you that when hormone is actually behaving as a messenger, and it is moving via the efferent pathway, and sometime it can also move as via the efferent pathway, and it will move toward the integrating center, which is called endocrine gland. In this case, the brain will be not considered as integrating center in this case. So if you look at the thermoregulation example, integrating center, which is actually brain, it sends the signals by nerve fibers, but simultaneously it can also cause the release of hormone that is actually traveling via the blood to many cells. And when the hormone is released in the blood, and this hormone is moving to the many cells of the body, many cells in the body, the hormone may increase the metabolic or the metabolism of the body, and it can also result in increased production of the heat, or heat can be generated in the body. So it means that the thermoregulation, in case of thermoregulation, we have already discussed this example. The brain simultaneously it is operating via the standard pathway, mean it is receiving the signal, and it is also relaying the information via the efferent pathway to the certain muscles and gland as well. But sometimes the brain can also send the information towards various glands, and those glands, they will start to secrete their secretion, that is hormone, and hormone can increase the metabolic rate of the body, which is an alternative way to increase the heat in the body. So hormone is also, in this case, is also behaving as also serving as an efferent pathway in thermoregulatory reflexes and reflex. So we can say that hormone can also be considered as part of the reflex, or it can also be considered as the component of the reflexor. So depending upon the nature of the reflex, the integrating center, sometime integrating center can either be present in the brain, or sometime it can be an endocrine gland that can also be considered as a specific type of the secretion or the message as well. So when we talk about the glands, as all of you know, that gland secretes specific type of the substances either into the extracellular fluid or to the lumens of the ducts in response to the specific stimuli. And mechanism of the glandular secretion, it is dependent upon the principle of the I think we have already discussed this. These are glands are, as all of you know that they are either exocrine gland or endocrine gland. I remember that we have already discussed these two slides. So I am skipping these two slides. Now we are moving to local homeostatic response. Okay. If you look at the local homeostatic response, in addition to the reflex, another group of the biological response that is also very much important, and that is called as local homeostatic response. So in case of local homeostatic response, the changes are initiated by the change in the external or internal environment, that will be called as stimuli, and that stimulus will induce an alteration of the cell activity with the net effect of counteracting the stimulus. Mean the ultimate purpose of the change or the alteration in the activity is to counteract the stimulus, and as all of you know that if that alteration is to decrease the effect of the stimulus, that will be called as negative feedback control, and if the alteration is to further increase the effect of the stimuli, that will be considered as positive feedback control. So like a reflex, local response is the result of sequence of the event which are actually proceeding from a stimulus. Meaning those sequence of the event, they will always be initiated from the stimulus and they will end in the form of the response. Unlike the reflex, if we look at the local responses, the entire sequence occurs on the area of the stimulus. So this is a very important difference between the reflex and the local homeostatic response, that in case of reflex, the stimulus is produced, a stimulus is detected elsewhere in the body, and ultimate response will be produced by the body in some other cell. But when we look at the local homeostatic response, in case of local homeostatic response, the stimulus and the response, they will be produced by the same part of the body. So that's why it is also called as local homeostatic response. Mean the stimulus is detected by specific part of the body, and that specific part will produce its response to counteract the effect of the stimuli. This will be called as a local homeostatic response. For example, if we look at the skin, when certain areas of the skins they are damaged, the damaged area itself will produce certain types of the chemicals, and that will help to provide the local defense against the further injury. As all of you know, must have observed in your daily life, when you suffer any type of the cut or any type of the injury, that specific part of the body, a specific part of the skin will produce certain type of the chemicals, and a covering will be produced on that specific area of the body, and this covering is to protect the further damage of the skin, or it is to protect the further entry of the microbes into the body. So this is what we can call it as local homeostatic response, that stimulus is actually any type of the injury or any type of the cut which was induced to your body, and your body in response to that stimuli will produce specific type of the chemicals, and those chemical will result in the formation of a protective layer on the skin, and that protective layer will protect the body against further injury, and it can also protect the body against entry of certain type of the microbe. So significance of the local response is that they provide the individual area of the body a mechanism for self-regulation. So here is another example of the reflex, and as all of you know that reflex is actually to minimize the change in the change in the effect of the stimuli. So reflex is to minimize or decrease in the body temperature, and that body temperature variation occurs when our body is exposed to reduced or the lower external environmental temperature. So here you can see that this is the begin mean. Here the stimulus will be applied, your body temperature it will start to decrease, and signal will be produced, temperature sensitive nerve cells they will be activated, and via the efferent pathway this decrease in body temperature will be detected by specific type of the receptors, and they will send the signals to the efferent pathway with the help of the nerve over integrating center or the brain. Specific type of the nerve cells in the brain, they will via the efferent pathway they will send the message to the effectors, which are muscles of the blood vessels, or which are muscles of the certain type of the body parts, which are skeletal muscles. These are the smooth muscles and these are the skeletal muscles. Smooth muscle will result in constriction of the blood vessels, and blood supply will be decrease there, and as a result of which heat loss from the body will be prevented. And in this case skeletal muscle they will start shivering and they will start contraction, and heat will be produced in this case. So all these are example of the negative feedback. So dashed arrow and the negative sign, it is this dashed arrow and the negative sign, they are basically to indicate the negative feedback. Control are the responses to decrease the body temperature. So it means that so this is the thermoregulation, or this is an example of the flow sheet diagram or flow chart diagram of a reflex arc. Okay ji, this is all about for today. If you have any question you can ask please. So yes please.
Efferent or difference